It's time for the first and only edition of Cowboys Huddle for the 2024 season here inside the Globe Life studios at the Star in Frisco, powered by Reliant Energy. Bill Jones joined to start off the show this week by Tommy Yarrish of DallasCowboys.com. Of course, the big news from the past week, a parting of the ways. Mike McCarthy no longer the head coach of the Cowboys. The search process has already begun this past week. Very busy behind the scenes. Jerry Jones and the rest of the brain trust here with the Cowboys. But Tommy, take me back to Monday and your reaction when news broke that Mike McCarthy was no longer the head coach of the Cowboys.
Yeah, somewhat surprising that the decision was made on Monday. Remember that Mike McCarthy's contract, along with that of his staff, was up on Tuesday at midnight. So you thought maybe Jerry Jones and company would take this to the buzzer with their negotiations, but they did not. And so Mike McCarthy was free to go on his way. He interviewed with the Chicago Bears on Wednesday. And the rest of his staff now as well, like I mentioned, is free to interview and look for new jobs as well. So Jerry Jones now tasked with searching for the 10th head coach in franchise history and the 9th head coach that he's had to select as owner of the Cowboys. And like you mentioned, Bill, already the process starting to get rolling there.
Reportedly didn't really get to the, in fact, Jerry Jones said in a written statement, they didn't get to the point of real negotiations on a new contract. You look at Mike McCarthy's time here as head coach over 5 years, 3 straight 12-win seasons, then an injury-plagued 7-10 season this year. What's your take on McCarthy and as the coach of the Cowboys?
Yeah, I think Mike did a good job. I think that this last season, obviously, it's easy to look at the record and you can kind of frown on it. But when you think about the injuries that he had to deal with, anytime you're without your franchise quarterback, it's hard to get through a season, much less when that franchise quarterback is the highest paid player in the NFL. And so that showed its fangs at times. But 3 straight 12-5 seasons, you can't discredit that. Obviously, Mike McCarthy didn't have the playoff success that I think Cowboys fans and maybe this ownership group wanted as well. But still, overall, I think he did a fair job as the Cowboys head coach, and I think he'll do a good job at his next spot, too.
All right. We've got the names that have been rumored out there. You got, in fact, 4 former Cowboys players like a Deion Sanders, a Kellen Moore, a Jason Witten, and Aaron Glenn, who, of course, now the defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. You've got Robert Saleh mentioned as a guy reportedly going to get an interview here, as well as Leslie Frazier. Where do you think this thing is going?
Well, it's going to be a process, that's for sure. I think that the Jones family is going to cast their net to, like you mentioned, guys that they are familiar with. And I think when you think about familiarity, the name that comes to mind is Kellen Moore, the Philadelphia Eagles offensive coordinator, who was the offensive coordinator under Mike McCarthy here with the Cowboys. He and Dak Prescott have had a good relationship. Dak Prescott played very well when Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator, so that is a name that makes a lot of sense. And then you look at some of the other names that have been reported, like Robert Saleh, who was the former head coach for the New York Jets. He's been known to have a great defensive mind and has had some of the best defenses in the NFL over the past couple of years. Didn't have the head coaching success in New York, but their defense was always very good. And then speaking of defense, Bill, you mentioned Aaron Glenn in Detroit, one of the hotter names in terms of coaching candidates for this cycle. Detroit's defense has been playing very well this year, albeit bitten by injuries as well. They're down to some deeper guys on their roster as well. So a lot of names to look at. And then I think the one with the most familiarity, you'd have to, the two I would say, would be Deion Sanders and Jason Witten. Deion Sanders, the head coach at Colorado, is a name being reportedly thrown out there, and then Jason Witten, the Hall of Fame tight end for the Cowboys. So really interesting group of names here to look at, and you question the experience level with some of these guys at certain points. How is it going to translate to the NFL? But all guys some guys who have played the game at a high level and who have coached the game at a high level being reported.
In the words of Coach Prime, it's truly intriguing to see what's going to happen
sure
next
is.
As far as who the next head coach of the Cowboys is going to be. Tommy Yarrish, we appreciate it. We're just getting started on this edition of Cowboys Huddle. David Moore, by the way, will be joining us in just a little bit. But up next, it's Will McClay, the Cowboys Vice President of Player Personnel.
Cowboys Huddle, powered by Reliant, is brought to you by Blockchain.com. Invest like your icons with Blockchain.com. Ford, your North Texas Ford dealers. Ford is the best in Texas. Bank of America, the official bank of the Dallas Cowboys. And brought to you by Miller Lite, the only beer of the Cowboys. This segment is brought to you by Blockchain.com. Invest like your icons with Blockchain.com.
Cowboys Huddle, powered by Reliant Energy, continues now. Bill Jones now joined by Will McClay, the Cowboys Vice President of Player Personnel, who has been a very busy man, and he's even getting busier. This coming week, the Shrine Bowl participants will be arriving here in Frisco. The Shrine Bowl game to be played on January 30th at AT&T Stadium. But what a process you have ahead for you, Will. You do it every year, and it never gets old, I'm sure, but it probably gets busier and busier every year.
Yeah, it starts getting busier and busier because of now, on the college side, we got to worry about all the different transfers. Not only do we have the East-West game, but then the following week, we've got the Senior Bowl, so that all reps up and we start finding out about the young players.
And so you got those games, and then you got the scouting combine end of February, 1st of March. The new league year this year will commence on March 10th and 12th. In the draft, the end of April, of course, and in between you got pro days and all sorts of things and free agency going on. What is it, though, for you that you're focused on right now and your scouting staff is focused on as far as the draft eligible players?
Well, what we're doing now is we get the opportunity to visit with these guys, start learning more about them. We've heard about who they are and what they're all about from their coaches and different parts of staff. Now we get to put our own emphasis on it, spend time with them, watch them out at practice against different competition. That's when we start to evaluate their competitiveness, their ability, their dog with our own eyes as opposed to opinions. And then we're also preparing for free agency and looking at our roster, the end of the season stuff.
How does it impact things that a coach search is going on right now? Because I know you want to be aligned with whatever the new head coach wants to do, but you already have in place certain traits that you look for in players as you go along, right?
That's a big part of it. What we want to do is continue to build on what we're looking for and, potentially not have to change that. These are the players that we have. We're looking to add quality football players, and when you add a coach, hopefully that coach will be able to use those football players. We have a feeling on what we're going to try and do and what we're looking for, and that the coach comes in and they provide the specifics. We're buying the house, they're putting the furniture in it. We're trying to make sure that we get the right pieces.
How have things evolved here now coming out of COVID with the extra years that college players have had? What are you seeing now in the draft? You've got older, more experienced players the last couple of years. Is it getting back now to what it was pre-COVID at all?
No, it's because of the transfer rules, the portal, all that, there's going to be, the environment's changing. We used to look at it and players coming out were 21, 22 years old. Now they're going to be 23, 24, 25 years old. So we have to address that. While they're playing more football, we're also looking at it from a longevity standpoint. How long can they play? Well, there's a difference in a guy coming out that's 22 and a guy coming out that's 25 or 26. So our mind frame and position and how we look at things have to change because of the conditions of the market.
And on the flip side of that, because you've got older, more mature players, more experienced players coming in, they may be able to contribute earlier than in the past, right?
That's what you hope, because it's about snaps. And we talk about quarterbacks, the number of snaps they play. When you look at Bo Nix and guys that played a lot in college football to guys that hadn't, if they take advantage of those and they get those reps, that's beneficial to them. But we also take into account the age, and there's all the things that go into our formula of trying to figure out what a player's value is.
It's very fascinating. All right, we continue with Will McClay in just a little bit, but up next here on Cowboys Huddle, it's David Moore of the Dallas Morning News.
This segment was brought to you by Blockchain.com. Invest like your icons with Blockchain.com. This segment is brought to you by WinStar World Casino and Resort. Proud to be the casino of the Dallas Cowboys. Please game responsibly.
Cowboys Huddle, powered by Reliant Energy, continues now here inside the Globe Life studios at the Star in Frisco. Bill Jones joined by David Moore of the Dallas Morning News, SportsDayDFW.com, whose week his offseason got very busy this past week with the breaking news. And now, what do you make of this coach search? Where's Jerry going with this, David?
You're asking me where Jerry's going? It's interesting. After Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones decided to part ways and it wasn't going to work going forward, apparently the first call that Jerry placed was to Deion Sanders. Now, then they started making requests later in the week, and the first actual interview by Zoom on Friday was Kellen Moore. Cowboys' former offensive coordinator and current offensive coordinator for Philadelphia. Can you have two candidates on the opposite ends of the spectrum, even any more than Kellen Moore and Deion Sanders?
And even though they're both former Cowboys players. Yeah. Okay. All right. So Deion, what do you make of the Deion?
This is a marriage made of marketing convenience in a lot of ways. I think that, and that's not to say nothing will come of it, but just initially I think what it did was, for Deion, it reinforced at the University of Colorado that, hey, look, we know other teams like you, want you. We know we're going to give you an extension at some point. Maybe you do it now. From the Cowboys' perspective, I think it's Jerry Jones putting a clear signal out there that I'm going to hear all the criticism about working with me and all this, but here's a reminder that there's some high-profile people that want this job. So I think it helped both men. They both have a great respect for each other. They're cut from the same marketing cloth in a lot of ways. Is that a good thing or a bad thing as far as them working together long term? That's something they would have to work through, but certainly it's intriguing. I will say from what Deion has said repeatedly, he wants to remain in college and deal with the college athlete more so than the NFL athlete. But Jerry Jones has been known to turn some heads before, so we'll see how that goes.
All right, and then Kellen Moore, here's a guy that was, of course, with the Eagles this year, the Chargers last year after being let go here, and not only as a player, but very close relationship with Dak Prescott as well. What do you make of Kellen Moore's candidacy here?
Well, again, you hear people talk about he checks a lot of boxes. He does. The primary box in my mind is that he's a very creative offensive mind. We've seen it. He keeps up with the trends. He adapts. He takes a little bit of what he likes to do and he watches the college game to see where things are going. And so much now of what you see in offense in the NFL is kind of flowing up from colleges. And you're seeing it more in the NFL game as far as doing some things in space. So all of that's a positive. There's still questions about Kellen. I think his command of a room, how forceful of a personality. Do you want a forceful personality? How important is that in a head coach today? So I think those are some things they'll work through.
Yep, and lots of questions still to be answered. David's going to rejoin us coming up. We'll look ahead to Sunday in the NFL playoffs. But up next, Will McClay is back, and we'll talk about one of the drafts from the past that was pretty good, the Will McClay and the Cowboys.
This segment was brought to you by WinStar World Casino and Resort. Proud to be the casino of the Dallas Cowboys. Please game responsibly.
Welcome back to Cowboys Huddle, powered by Reliant Energy. Bill Jones now rejoined by Cowboys Vice President of Player Personnel, Will McClay. And Will, I want to take you back 10 years. Let's go back to the 2014 draft. I believe you were sort of in charge of that draft, and it was a pretty good draft for this team. And there's a couple of players I want to specifically talk about, and that would be your first-round pick that year, a guy out of Notre Dame who became a 9-time Pro Bowler in this league, Zach Martin. Take me back to when you drafted Zach Martin, and did you see that Zach Martin was going to be an all-decade player when you drafted him?
I think the unique part about the process when you talk about Zach, I mean, there was the Johnny Manziel deal that was going on that time, and then there was Zach Martin that we all believed in, and it was one of the very few instances that we do this. Like, everybody has an opinion, they give a grade. Everybody gave the same grade or with a 100th of a point off for Zach, so we all saw him the same way. And then him coming in and being that guy that we saw, we hope to duplicate that many more times, but he's running around proud about his Notre Dame Irish right now.
That's right.
But those are the kind of guys that we're looking for, and we felt good about that.
And he's got a decision to make about his future right now. How proud are you of what Zach Martin has done the last decade with this team?
I think it's an example of what we're trying to build and what we want to have 53 players on the roster be like Zach Martin. to be a quality player, quality human being, and that can help drive the organization forward. And you know, as he makes his decisions, but those are, and him being around the locker room, he's instilled some of that stuff in Tyler Smith and some of the guys that are around. They want to know what greatness is. There's an example that was in the locker room.
You know, I talked recently with Jason Witten. He said he thinks the best teammate he's ever been around was Zach Martin.
Yes.
All right, let's take you to the second round of that 2014 draft. Cowboys were picking 47th in the second round. You took your second round and your third round pick, moved up, made a trade with Washington up to number 34, and took an edge rusher out of Boise State named DeMarcus Lawrence. You had just lost DeMarcus Ware to the Denver Broncos that spring, and here comes DeMarcus Lawrence, and where is he a decade later with 4 Pro Bowls under his belt?
Yeah, that was kind of a nerve-wracking draft to run because of what we lost and what we were trying to replace, but Jerry was very adamant about pass rusher at that point in time. And, you know, we went through it and looked at it, and a great job that the college scouts do of talking about what's available in the draft so we have a good feel for it. And at that draft, we felt like there was one other different pass rusher, and we felt like that was DeMarcus. And, you know, you tell Jerry that's the one that we want, and he's going to take and make the right decisions to make that trade to move up and get him. And, you know, he's just proven to be the kind of guy that you want to build your team around. He's super tough, plays hard all the time, extremely productive, that leadership quality that he's grown into. So that was a great draft and setting the stage for, you know, us getting to this point.
How satisfying is it to you to see how a guy like DeMarcus Lawrence and the growth that he made, not just in a football sense, but emerging as a leader in that locker room?
Yeah, you know, when we see each other, we talk about it all the time. We talked about when he was a rookie coming in, and you see the transformation, but that's part of this business, is seeing guys grow within your organization, and then partake, you know, give some of that information to some of the other guys, and those guys follow that lead. If you want to know how to play Cowboys football on defense, you watch DeMarcus Lawrence.
All right, and that's what Will McClay is doing the next several months. He's looking for the next Zach Martin and the next D-Law, right?
Yes, sir.
There you go. All right, Will, we appreciate it. Up next, David Moore rejoins us. We take a look at the playoff games on Sunday in the NFL.
Closed captioning is brought to you by the Texas Lottery. Cowboys scratch tickets from the Texas Lottery are here. Play today.
Final couple of minutes here of Cowboys Huddle, powered by Reliant Energy. As David Moore rejoins the show, we take a look ahead to Divisional Playoff Sunday in the NFL. Let's start with the early game on Sunday afternoon in the NFC. The Philadelphia Eagles and Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator, hosting the Los Angeles Rams.
Will he have his mind on this game, Bill, or was it just...
All Cowboys' eyes will be on the play calling by the Philadelphia Eagles in this game, right?
Yes, it will be. Yeah, that's going to be, you know, a lot of people were surprised by the Rams because of what Minnesota did during the season. It was interesting because Minnesota was the one team I kept waiting during the regular season. Well, they can't keep this up. They just don't have that. And it didn't catch up with them until their final 2 games, and then it really caught up with them. But still, where the Rams are, the pressure they were able to put on in that game to win that game, I don't see that happening here with the run game that Philadelphia has. And I think A.J. Brown, we saw he felt a little underused and underappreciated the last game. I imagine that Kellen Moore will make up for that in this one. I would expect Philadelphia to win this.
All right, and how about the big one, the AFC game, the late game on CBS on Friday or on Sunday afternoon? Yeah. The Ravens go to the Bills.
I think that's the most fascinating matchup of the week. I think you can make a pretty strong argument. I know people in Kansas City will disagree, but I think there's a good chance the winner of this game can go on to win it all. And the narrative is fascinating because it's Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, 2 guys who have so many accolades in the regular season, but haven't been able to break through in the postseason. One of these guys is going to break through to the championship game at the expense of the other.
All right, should be fun on Sunday. It's been fun all season with you, David Moore, one of the survivors on this show. And we appreciate you joining us all season for Cowboys Huddle, powered by Reliant Energy.
Cowboys Huddle, powered by Reliant, was brought to you by Blockchain.com. Invest like your icons with Blockchain.com. Ford, your North Texas Ford dealers. Ford is the best in Texas. Bank of America, the official bank of the Dallas Cowboys. And brought to you by Miller Lite, the only beer of the Cowboys. And to watch more Dallas Cowboys content on your connected TV, download the Cowboys Now app on Amazon Fire, Roku, and Apple TV.